Breaking news coming in, the Defence Minister Rajnath Singh is holding a meeting with the service chiefs amid the ongoing protests over the Agnipath scheme. We have with us Vishnu. Vishnu, who all are part of that crucial meeting?
Well, the Armed Forces chiefs should be a part of that meeting. The Additional Secretary in the Department of Military Affairs, which is the nodal ministry which is actually handling the implementation or the rollout of the Agnipath scheme, will be there as well. It's an important meeting. It comes in the back of a lot of violence which we've seen over the last couple of days. There is continued violence today in parts of India over the scheme, which is a revolutionary scheme. It's a radical scheme for recruitment into the Indian Armed Forces, but it's also one that's not gone off well in terms of public acceptance, with a lot of people being very, very worried about whether they'd get employment after 4 years. Now, the government is, because the scheme is for 4 years. So the government is at pains to explain to people. In fact, we'll be carrying an interview with Lieutenant General Anil Puri in the next couple of hours. He is the Additional Secretary in the Department of Military Affairs, which is rolling this all out, where he's gone to a great extent to great pains to actually explain why employment is something which is likely to not be affected once Agniveers leave the army after 4 years. Whether this is going to convince anybody on the ground, we don't know. But the government is saying quite clearly at this juncture that they're absolutely clear that those who are indulging in arson and violence, is what we've seen over the last couple of days, there is no place for people like that in the armed forces. And if those are aspirants for the armed forces, then by arson and vandalism and all of what we've seen, that's not something which is at all acceptable. But I think the major relaxation, a couple of them which were announced earlier on today, is what will also be looked at by the Defence Minister in that meeting that we've got images coming in. So yes, earlier today the Home Ministry has decided to give 3 years age relaxation beyond the prescribed upper age limit to Agniveers for recruitment in the Central Armed Police Forces and the Assam Rifles. Further, for the first batch of Agniveers, the age relaxation will be for 5 years beyond the prescribed upper age limit. And most significantly, and I'll explain all of this, the Home Ministry has decided to reserve 10% vacancies for recruitment in the Central Armed Police Forces and the Assam Rifles for Agniveers. So this is important because essentially it means that almost all, or a large percentage of the Agniveers who are being recruited now, will get an opportunity to work in the Central Armed Police Forces and in the Assam Rifles once they do graduate, should they choose to go down that path. I did ask whether the new 10% quota is over and above the existing other quotas which actually exist for ex-servicemen, and I was told that no, in fact, the overall number of people who are going to be hired into the Central Armed Police Forces, that remains, and within that there is a 10% quota which is exclusively for Agniveers. Whether there are any other quotas, I believe there is a 10% for other categories as well, that will remain. So that's the way in which it's being organized. Now, how this all augurs for the system, we'll only find out after 4 years. But obviously these are major concessions at a time when this is a scheme which on the ground has not been acceptable. But the government absolutely clear, they are rolling this out and there's no place for the violence that we've been seeing.
Vishnu, how soon can we expect the rollout of that new plan, and when will the training start for the new recruits?
So 48 hours is when they're going to start rolling it out. In fact, I expect that meeting with the Defence Minister Rajnath Singh to actually spell out how it's all going to be rolled out. And I think it's going to be sometime early next year that we're going to see the first batch of Agniveers actually join the services.
Right, and like you mentioned, Vishnu, that slight change that we're seeing as far as that plan is concerned, the concessions that you spoke about, also that age limit for that 1 year, 2022, that age limit that's gone up to 23. Can we expect more changes after this meeting?
Let's just talk a little bit about what's been done. Essentially, what's been done is the government has raised the age limit, right, to from 17.5 to 21. So they've increased that to 23 now. For those entering the Agniveer scheme. Why is that the case? Because remember, for the last couple of years, there was no recruitment in the armed forces because of COVID, and therefore a lot of aspirants to the armed forces would say that 1 second, COVID is not our fault, we need to try out for the post of Agniveer as well. So the government has said, okay, fine, in that case we'll increase the upper age limit. But if you've increased the upper age limit from 21 to 23 for those entrants into the Agniveer scheme, then you also need to increase the upper age limit for the Central Armed Police Forces, where many of them would eventually be hired. So that's what they've also announced today. The Home Ministry has decided to give 3 years age relaxation beyond the prescribed upper age limit to Agniveers for recruitment in the Central Armed Police Forces. So once they do join the Central Armed Police Forces, if that is what they want, that system will also be accommodated in order to include those who are now somewhat older than what the Agniveer program had originally envisaged. But this is all being done on a one-time basis at this stage. Once the system becomes more fluent and is more regularized, then perhaps they'll go back to the initial age upper limit, both for the Agniveer scheme and for the Central Armed Police Forces.
Right, Vishnu, all eyes now on that crucial meeting that's going to be taking place between Rajnath Singh and the army, as well as all the defence chiefs. So, Vishnu, we will keep coming back to you for more on that.